Welcome everyone to episode 195 of Just Joshing. I am your host Joshua Penteloresco. I write stuff and podcast too. Today my guest is none other than Brent Nichols. Continuing my Aurora Award finalist, he is a very, very talented author in his own right. You should definitely take a look at any of his works. I admire Brent for the fact that he has made it pretty much as an independent. Just one of those dudes who just quietly goes about the business of being creative at all times. And you can't not help but admire that. He's also got a really dry sense of humor I really appreciate, as you'll find out when you listen to this conversation. Beyond that, I've been having fun. I am been in Windsor, Ontario now. I just checked into my hotel. I'll be hanging out with my dad, kicking his butt in air hockey. I currently have carrot cake with me to go home with. So, 'cause it's the good stuff. My grandmother made it. I also got lots of other things to consume. Grandmothers do that to you, ladies and gentlemen. They really, really do. That all said, I wouldn't have it any other way. I love my time with my grandmother. Nana, I love you. If you listen to this, I'll see you hopefully sooner than later. And to the rest of you, let's get to the conversation. But first, a word from Jim Jackson. So, just for the record, I'm going to turn the recorder on right now. So if there's anything incriminating you want to say, make it good.
I got nothing.
You got nothing? You're squeaky clean.
Sure.
You'll go with that? Okay. So I am with Brent at a Starbucks. That was a quest to find. And he has a mysterious concoction that you ordered from the mighty Starbucks?
Yes. Not too sure what's in the glass, but it's got some strawberries in it, so...
It's all good. So how are you this fine morning?
So far, so good.
Well, thanks for coming out and doing this with me. So, you are a writer. You've been doing this. What got you into it?
Well, my imagination, I suppose. When I was a kid, I read all the time. It was my escape from a less than ideal life, and I always admired writers, because I realized one day my personality is being formed, my opinions are being altered, I'm being affected by people I've never met, and in many cases people who died before I was born. And so to some degree, just as a small child, writers were my role models. Writers had this incredible power over me. I wanted to be one of those people with that kind of wielding that kind of power. So writers were more or less my heroes from a very early age, so I always wanted to be one.
So well, at least you're open with your megalomania, which is all good. He's got an amused look on his face when I say that. But who did you read?
As a kid?
Yeah.
A bit of everybody. It was some pretty eclectic reading taste, so it's hard to pick out patterns. My dad had like this massive collection of Louis L'Amour westerns, so I read pretty much all of those. I read classic science fiction. Robert Heinlein was an author I liked a lot. At one point, I tried to start reading the classics. I decided I wanted to be culturally literate. I wanted to know what people were talking about when they referred to the classics, so I started reading various classics with varying degrees of success. As a kid, I couldn't appreciate fine literature, so I tended to come away kind of bored and unimpressed with a lot of the classics, but I slogged through quite a few of them, and some of them I even enjoyed. And then I read whatever miscellaneous books crossed my path as well.
So, what was I was reading Heinlein too. I read what people call old Heinlein a lot, and then I stumbled into new Heinlein kind of by accident. But I'm assuming you, like me, prefer the older Heinlein stuff.
Yeah, I think I get the impression that Heinlein reached a point where he was so successful they were going to publish whatever he wrote, and so he took the brakes off and started publishing all the weird shit that had been in his head the whole time. That's my guess. I don't actually know this, but
yeah.
Certainly I liked him better when he told stories that were a little more accessible.
Yeah, a little bit more straightforward. My favorite of his from the older stuff, I like Moon is a Harsh Mistress. Starship Troopers is really, really fun. I like my favorite short of his is The Roads Must Roll, which is I really like that one a lot. So that was kind of like when I was getting started. I would read him. I would read Asimov. I would read Ray Bradbury. Those would be the guys those were the guys that influenced me, and just a touch of Edgar Rice Burroughs. So yeah. So imagination meets like really cool science concept stuff was kind of the thing for me. So what classics? So you, now that you're older and hopefully wiser, do you appreciate classics more now?
You know, I took some university courses and had a bunch of assigned reading that was literary fiction, and now I loathe it. I frickin' hate. Nobody should have to read To the Lighthouse from start to finish. I mean, that's cruel. That book is, half the book is just people thinking about going to the lighthouse and not actually going, and suffering terribly and not doing anything, and thinking about how much they're suffering. It's horrible. So I've got an unreasonable aversion to literary fiction now, because I couldn't pick and choose and select the classics that were to my taste or the literary fiction that was to my taste. It was assigned reading. I had to keep going page after godforsaken page. Under the Volcano, there's a dreadful book. That it actually makes To the Lighthouse look okay. So actually I really strongly dislike literary fiction these days. To the point where I'll rant about it because it was fair enough. I had to read it.
Well, you know, you shouldn't have to. Like for me, I didn't actually really start. I read. So when I was in high school, I would read some classics just because I would extend. But my classics were stuff like Samuel Taylor Coleridge, stuff like Victor Hugo's Les Miserables. That was definitely a fun one. And so I got to. So I was able to be picky and choosy, and so when I got older, some of them today I'll kind of like go, they're not for me. They were definitely written for their time and their place, and literature as it's written has changed so much, even in the last 20 years, let alone the last 200 or even longer, depending on who you're reading. So, but
well, I realized I was conflating literary fiction with the classics, which is not entirely accurate. So some of the classics are actually entertaining. I thoroughly enjoyed White Fang, for instance. That's just a really fun book full of adventure. Despite being a classic, it's actually quite readable and enjoyable.
It's always nice when you read the other classic I really enjoy is someone like C.S. Lewis, I like Narnia. I mean, that actually is. The sad thing is, I'm old enough to where it's like that wasn't a classic. Now it kind of is a classic. Yeah. So, and now genre fiction now is. I mean, it has its own like classic section. So, what do you read now? Like is it mostly fiction, nonfiction?
I'm reading a lot of fiction. I still got very eclectic tastes. Lately, I've been reading the Aurora nominations, so that's actually completely dominated my reading list recently. Just going through the Aurora nominated books and short stories and anthologies. So that's been interesting. That has gotten me to read things that I would not have picked up otherwise, like the young adult books. There's nothing, and not one of the young adult nominations is something I would have picked up on my own. But they're all, I'm enjoying them all.
Some of them are quite good. I like Susie's. Jane always writes very, very good stuff, and there's the ones I'm kind of on right now. So, yeah.
I'm in the middle of Liz Gronkowski's Houses of the Old Blood. It is so good. It is remarkably good. It grabs you from the first page. It's thoroughly entertaining. The prose is very nice. I've been really impressed by that one.
Okay, I'll have to check that out when I get to that. So, Liz, I'm coming for it. So. But then, so when did you actually get published?
So, I guess it was 2.5 years ago. Bundoran Press had an open submission window, and I kind of decided at the last minute on a whim to write something for them. And I took one of the many ideas that's been rolling around in my head for a long time and decided really at the last minute that I would try to meet their deadline that was coming up pretty shortly, and finally wrote this novel that had been in my head for a while and sent it off, and sure enough they decided to take it. So that would have been So it would have been released at When Words Collide 2 years ago. So just over 2 years ago today, like 2 years and 2 weeks, 2 years and a week and a half, is when it was released. And this is actually remarkable speed for traditional publishing. I submitted it the same year at the end of January. It was released in early to mid-August.
That's
That's
very quick.
breakneck speed for a traditional press. So it's one of the advantages of a very small publisher is they can be reasonably nimble. They don't just say, "Thank you very much, see you in a couple of years."
That's the advantage, right? They're small enough where they can keep up with the trends, and they're not as bogged down by the machinery of publishing. And so they can be almost guerrilla. Actually, they're almost very guerrilla. Like Hayden runs a really, really good press. I like the fact that it's like hard science fiction isn't as in vogue these days as much as it used to be. And it's cool to see that there's a press that really, really focuses on that stuff very well. So, so from Bundoran, you've just been doing your own thing, or has it just been like a combination of working with them and other publishers? What has been your road?
So aside from 2 books with Bundoran, everything else I've done is and some short stories in various anthologies. Aside from that, it's all been self-published for me.
So you're a hybrid.
Yeah. I'm a hybrid.
Yeah. Which is, I think, going to be the norm going forward anyway. I think most, like I know this for myself, that when I'm looking at, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm going to go for like different publishing houses too, because it definitely adds to your credibility. And also, there are some really good people to work with that are doing stuff in that industry. On the flip side, though, I also know that there's going to be, like, as a writer, we always have to be producing something. And if we're not doing that, it's kind of like out of sight, out of mind kind of deal. So you always have to, I think, have your foot doing something for yourself, and then you always should have a foot something, with a publisher if you can do that. So, and then again, there are people that are self-published that are incredibly successful doing it. So,
yeah, there's no one clear path.
Yeah.
You do this because it makes you more money, or do this because it brings you more recognition, or what have you. There's really no clear choice among the various options that people have.
Do you enjoy more? Do you enjoy the traditional, or do you enjoy doing your own thing? Or are there both things you enjoy in both?
Yeah, they're very different from each other. There's a lot to be said for having control over all of it, choosing my own cover art, writing my own blurbs, and so on, and my own pricing, etc. There's a lot to be said for being able to do it all, having control over everything myself. On the other hand, there's been working with Bundoran has also been very rewarding. I wouldn't have my Aurora nominations if I didn't if it hadn't been for Bundoran.
Yes. So they made you better?
I may have improved my writing somewhat by working with Hayden. He's a very good editor. I don't think it's been a really significant thing. It certainly didn't hurt. I know he improved the 2 books that he worked on, and in early days, I got some real insights from him when he edited short stories for me. So he's helped me improve as a writer at least a little bit, but maybe not a tremendous amount. He didn't do a lot of editing. He was fairly pleased with the manuscripts that I sent him. So he made a few suggestions, but not so much that it became, if there was a tremendous amount of editing, that would be like a form of training in itself, to just go through the whole manuscript page by page, looking at what can be improved. That could teach a person a lot, but that's not what we did with my books. He was pleased with most of it and just made smaller suggestions. So I don't think it's improved me as a writer a lot. It has improved me as a writer a little bit.
Well, fair enough. So what is your current work? Like, what are you currently working on?
So at the moment, I'm working on a short story. So I've got a self-published military science fiction series, The Green Zone War, and I've released 4 books. I'm planning to release a few more. I'm not sure how many. I plan to keep writing them as long as people keep buying them in reasonably large numbers. So we'll see how that goes. But I was approached a couple of months ago by Podium Publishing, which does ebooks. They produce ebooks, and they asked if they could produce my Green Zone War books, and they encouraged me to come up with a short story is set in that universe as a reader magnet, and they were going to release that as a very short free audiobook to try to get people interested in the series. So I'm finally working on a short story to use as a reader magnet for that one series. So that's my current project. And then I need to write another book in that series reasonably soon before the series loses momentum in the marketplace. And then I've got a few other miscellaneous kind of half-complete things that I would need to finish up and just get them off my hard drive and into the world.
Fair enough. So the Green Zone, like military sci-fi, is was that the kind of stuff like you kind of like expected to tell, or did you have like an idea of some other things you wanted to tell?
I started out writing all kinds of different stories and jumping around different genres, and military science fiction was what started to sell really well, so that was what I've stuck with. But it was just one more thing in a long list of interests, things that I'd be happy to write about.
Fair enough. So what other things would you be interested in, right? Like would you like to tackle that you haven't tackled yet?
I've got it in mind to try to write a Western, just they don't sell terribly well, so I may never actually bother doing that, but just because I grew up reading them, it's I want to try writing a few. I've been writing a bit of short crime fiction for some of Coffin Hop's anthologies, so I might try writing some mystery or crime fiction. And there's all kinds of I always wanted to write, and I've written some high fantasy or sword and sorcery type stuff, and but it's never sold well. So I'm inclined to not give up and take another crack at that at some point. I'm not sure exactly what that's going to look like, but I want to try the fantasy genre again as well.
Yeah. So when we met, I think you saw me lugging around my board game.
Right.
Yeah. So you're kind of working on one of those yourself?
For no particular good reason other than on a whim. This is Chris Carolyn's fault. I'm actually still angry with him about this. He posted on Facebook the existence of this company that does custom tabletop games and game components. Game Crafter, it's called.
Yes. Which
put the idea into my head, and before I knew it, I was tinkering with game design ideas, and I've wasted all kinds of time on that. So so I did developed a board game. I've got a tester version I ordered a few custom components and a board from Game Crafter, and I used some pieces from another game, and so I've got a working prototype, and I've been tinkering with the rules and the design of the game, and it's at a point now where I'm pretty happy with it, and I'm pretty much ready to publish. It's one of those things that's never going to make me a nickel. I've already spent more money than I'll ever make back from it, just on the components that I've ordered. But it's been a neat experience. It's been interesting to create the game, and a lot of fun and a lot of satisfaction in playing the game and being with other people, playing with them and seeing them have fun with the game that I designed.
Well, I found it's actually kind of helped with my storytelling a little bit, because I like mine was a complete accident, because I wanted to do I do poetry, and I had this request to do this story, and I thought, the editor liked it. It didn't quite make it to the final anthology cut, but she really liked it. She said, you should work on it. It's like, okay, I want to do something different. So because of the nature of the story, it's like, a board game map would be super cool. And that's how I kind of like stumbled into this. But I've also found out it's really interesting because a game in and of itself has a lot of storytelling components to it. At least mine does, right? Mine is a snakes and ladders kind of chase game. It's really it's interesting. I find that now when I'm writing that story, it's now they almost are linked together. Like the game and then the book are almost like in concert. I know your game is kind of separate, but where I'm getting at is I find when I exercise my creative muscles differently, when I go back to what I normally do, like with writing or podcasting, I find I come at it with a little bit more depth. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Yeah.
I can't directly relate to it, but sure. I'm glad it works for you.
Yes. So it doesn't make your even just going to your work like fresher, or like maybe approaching it with a little bit more depth than what you did before when you do that kind of stuff.
I'm not sure. I do a lot of different kinds of creative things, and I can't directly see that doing one thing affects other things, but perhaps it does on some level.
Yeah. So what else do you do?
I sketch, I draw, and I'm trying to learn digital painting. That'd be the main thing.
Like what are you learning with, like Photoshop or?
Lately I've been doing digital painting with Photoshop. I started out about a year and a half, I guess almost 2 years ago. I started just sketching on paper with and trying to also teach myself watercolors. Watercolors fascinate me, but I'm a mediocre watercolor artist, but it's when I can get it to work, the layering in watercolors and the subtlety of it is really gratifying on the rare occasions when I can get it to work. So ultimately I want to work digitally because you can fix your mistakes, and it's just it's a much more efficient way to work. So ultimately, digitally is the way I want to work. But I started out on paper. There's things like with watercolors. If you got something too dark, well, too bad, you're done. You cannot lighten it in watercolors, for example. So.
My buddy, I have a buddy. He's a artist, so we shared a booth at a convention. So he would bring like paper and watercolor, and he would literally like make stuff on the fly. It was really fascinating to watch him work. He went to me once. So what do you want me to make? I said Double Dragon. So he did like the red and blue of Billy and Jimmy Lee. It was such an interesting experience. So what do you like to draw?
Just whatever. I'm trying to teach myself to draw people, which is endlessly frustrating. I used to do watercolor birds for a while. I like birds, and they lend themselves well to the watercolor medium, and then just miscellaneous stuff, whatever. My other creative outlet is cover design, where I work with stock art, and I'll modify stock art and add text elements to create book covers as well. So that's sort of a hybrid of graphic design and actual artwork. It's more graphic design.
No, it definitely is more of a design. What's been your favorite one?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know that I can pick. I've designed. I started creating pre-made book covers, so I've made literally several hundred covers, so it would be hard to pick a favorite. I'm pretty pleased with the latest Enigma Front cover, but I actually did very little. I found a piece of stock art that was perfect for the cover, and I did very little other than say, oh, I picked that piece. So my actual contribution, aside from choosing the artwork, was quite minimal. But I'm really pleased with the way the book looks.
The book looks really good. So do you do like logo design stuff as well, or is that part of the book process for you, or do you get that outsourced?
Nobody's asked me to make them a logo. I made my own logo for the cover design company, coolseriescovers.com. Other than that, nobody's asked me to make them a logo.
Okay. I just figured since you're going into like all the design elements, it would feel like something you at least would try? I've tried. I did I took magazine design, because I'm very fascinated with how design actually works with books. I worked for an author that very valued presentation, and Misty was absolutely right. Like you don't notice good design unless, right, you never notice it. Bad design, however, you notice it immediately. And it's when I always come up with a book for myself, I always think about the presentation of the book, because that's a big part of the reader experience that a lot of people take for granted, actually. So that's a personal thing. So I try it all. It's like, okay, how does the logo look? I'm not good at logos. I try. It's not my thing. But it's just one of those things where I kind of look at it and go, you have to try and you have to understand. Like I said, I just find it helps me understand my medium better. You're trying all these different things out. That way for you, or?
I suppose it's hard to analyze the creative process and put it into words sometimes. I just do stuff,
and things happen. Fair enough. Well, Mr. Brent, I think I could be wrong. I think we have an interview. What do you think?
Sure.
You're okay with that?
Seems like an interview to me.
Okay, seems like an interview to you. So what I want you to do is I want you to plug your current work, whatever that is, or forthcoming work, depending on if it's really soon. And how can people find you?
So if you're into military science fiction, have a look on Amazon for Jake Elwood. That's my pen name that I'm for military science fiction. And browse the books. Currently I'm working my way through the Green Zone War series, but I've got several other titles out there. So check those out. That'd be great. Also, under my own name, Brent Nichols, my 2 books with Bundoran Press, Stars Like Cold Fire and Light of a Distant Sun, also available, and I'm quite proud of those books as well. So those are kind of tough to find, but browse them on the internet and you can find them that way. So you can order them from Bundoran Press directly. There's not many bookstores that got them on the shelves, but the internet certainly has them.
How can people find you?
How can people find me personally?
Yeah.
Well, I'm sitting at a sidewalk table at a Starbucks here on McLeod Trail. So honk as you go by and I'll wave. So if you honk and nobody waves, well, that's not me.
Okay. And that was my conversation with Brent Nichols. I want to thank Brent very much for being part of the show. Please welcome back anytime. Hopefully you win your award, bud. Good luck. I'm rooting for you. And that will do it for another episode of Just Joshing. You can support the podcast a number of different ways. First among them is you can subscribe to this podcast either through Podomatic, iTunes, or anywhere else you can get this podcast. Do so. Leave a comment if you like a show, a like, whatever. If you don't like the show, don't tell anybody. I'll understand. Trust me, I really will. You can buy my books. You can buy The Watcher, Storm Dancer, Wandering God, courtesy of MirrorWorldPublishing.com. They currently have a 50% off deal going on right now, so definitely check them out. Beyond all that, you can get my books at Barnes & Noble, Indigo, Amazon, Kobo, wherever my books can be found. You can pick them up. Please do so. Outside of that, there's my YouTube channel, Joshua Penteloresco. And beyond that, hey, just thank you for listening to my show. I'll be back next time with a great little 2-parter next week, and then we conclude the Aurora series the week after that. All right, guys, stay inspired. Don't do anything I wouldn't do, or don't get caught. All right.
Josh.